chair of the committee, Jose Huizar. I think we are expecting Councilmember Englander and Councilmember Alarcon are both expected to be here today. If we could go through the consent items. We had 1, 2, and 3 on consent, but I see we have some cards for item number 2. So we will have items 1 and 3 on consent, and when my colleagues come up, we will approve those items on consent. Yes, ma'am.
Can you let us know, all of us are here for item number 2, so we only need to speak for consent.
You only want to speak if there's someone against it. I usually advise that if it's going to be on consent and you're for it, stop while you're ahead. No need to speak. Okay. So no. 1, 2, 3 on consent. And when my colleagues come, we'll approve those on consent, or if they don't come, we'll just send it to full council as a report of 1. So why don't we start with item number 4?
Item number 4 is Board of Public Works.
I'm sorry, let's start with item number 5, because I think that item number 5 is in my district, and I'll probably be the one leading that discussion. In item 4, I think others may have some opinions on that. So let's do item number 5. Please.
Item number 5 is a motion by Council Members Huizar and Wesson relative to initiating design and construction in connection with the Broadway Sidewalks Repair 2nd Street to 4th Street project.
Thank you. Is staff here on this item? This was a motion that I put forward to continue some of the reconstruction of some of the sidewalks on Broadway. In fact, the report 1989 by the CRA stated that we should get to work on these sidewalks imminently, I think was the adjective that was used, saying that they pose grave danger to pedestrians who will walk. Not to mention that poses great liability for the city, and certainly we don't want anybody to get hurt. On top of that, we are undertaking a Bringing Back Broadway initiative, where we're looking to bring back Broadway to its luster years, where it was both a daytime and nighttime venue for people to shop and to go for entertainment, and so that has prompted us to pay more attention to this. Now, I understand we lost $2 million because we did not move on this a few years ago, and we were told that if we move on this, we could recoup those $2 million and continue fixing the sidewalks. Now, for all the reasons stated above, it makes sense to move forward, even more so than we just had a hearing at our last Public Works Committee where we were told we have no money to fix sidewalks. So why would we ever want to give away $2 million when we could use it to fix sidewalks, especially when they're needed? But I understand there's a difference of opinion. On the one side, you have CRA, CLA, CAO, Bureau of Engineering, and on the other side, you have the city attorney who has a difference of opinion as to what direction we should go, whether it's a 5-foot or a 7-foot, whatever you want to call it, and whether we could do more or less depending on what direction we go. So with that, you are with
Bureau of Engineering.
Why don't we give it to you and have you make a presentation in the CRA, and if the CAO or CLA wants to jump in, feel free to do so. Welcome.
Very good. Mike Brown with the Bureau of Engineering Street and Stormwater Program. I have a handout that was just passed out, and we looked at this as going entirely 2% cross slope, which is ADA compliant, over the entire sidewalk. What that would have meant is that we would have had to gone into the street, reconstruct a good portion of the street to raise the curb and gutter in order to meet that cross slope. We don't have the budget. That would have taken our budget from about $5.5 million total project budget to over $9 million total project budget. So looking at this and several ways of handling it, we came up with a proposal to do the 2% cross slope, which is ADA compliant, over 14 feet of sidewalk, give or take a foot, and then put in the grooved portion, groove the sidewalk as you see on the right-hand picture that designates a change in slope on the sidewalk. That slope will be a maximum of 8%, and we figured that that 3 feet is where you have the street trees, you have the street lights, you have the street furniture. It's where people don't really walk anyway. This will also allow us to keep a 8 to 9 foot maximum curb, which we feel is the maximum, and still be safe for any pedestrians crossing the street. This takes care of our immediate safety problem, where we have these basements and these sidewalks over the deteriorating basements. We can go ahead and fix those within the budget. We only have 3 feet that are left, which is greater than 2%. However, this can be taken care of if in a future project if we want to, so that we only have to deal with that 3 feet, not the entire sidewalk. We feel that either way we're going to have issues because, and our first concern is, of course, taking care of public safety. So this proposal is what we're looking at in order to take care of the public safety, take care of instead of a 5 foot wide path of travel, which we, like I say, that's up to interpretation, but the way we look at it is you need at least a 5 foot wide path of travel with a 2% cross slope. This gives us a 14 foot wide path of travel with only a 2% cross slope. That's basically our proposal that we'd like to go forward with.
Thank you. CRA, do you have anything to add?
This discussion has gone on.
Your name for the
Oh,
record.
excuse me. Kurt Gibbs, Senior Resource Development Officer, CRA LA's Downtown Region. The discussion with regard to what's required or provided for under federal and state law has gone on for 18 months now, and you are correct. As a result of that, the California Transportation Commission swept $2 million because the city was not ready to allow CRA to issue the bid package over this issue. And so we're very hopeful that with our ability to come to a solution here, that we can work with the state of California to see whether we might retrieve those $2 million. In addition, CRA is actually quite concerned that we have an additional $1.8 million appropriation, and again, our ability to move this thing forward would allow us to be able to get those funds encumbered and contracted for, so we can get those spent so we don't have the same issue from Caltrans and FHWA relative to this project taking quite some time. So again, the federal guidelines provide for 4 foot continuous paths, state guidelines provide for 5 foot, and we are more than accommodating what the requirement is. So we look forward to DOE doing these drawings and getting this project out to bid and trying to retrieve the $2 million.
I'm sorry, I would like to add one more thing on the design. At the bus stops, we will raise the curb, and we will have a 2% cross slope at the bus stops so that we are in full ADA compliance as people get on and off the buses. Everywhere else outside the bus stops will have this other scheme.
Thank you. Is there someone from the city attorney's office here? No one from the city attorney's office. You guys notified the city attorney's office that this was going to be out. Okay, I've been advised that the U.S. Access Board has written us emails telling us that the designs by BOE are ADA compliant. They meet our regulations, but our city attorney may have a different opinion. I would like to move that we move the BOE report forward to full council, get this done once and for all, and if the final arbiter is federal government and they're telling us the law that we're okay, and even then, I mean, I think if we don't do anything, double negative, we don't do anything, we shouldn't, we were creating more liability for ourselves if someone should get hurt on these sidewalks, so we should address this immediately. So, is there a second to move the BOE report forward?
Yeah. Move the motion forward, sir.
Second,
Move your motion forward.
pardon me?
Your motion, move it
Yes,
forward.
move the motion forward with the BOE report. To full council. Okay? That takes care of that. Thank you all for your work. Thank you all for your... Secondly, items number 1, 2, and 3. Now that we have Mr. Englander here for the record as well, you could have your second on those? Yes. Vacations, moving them on consent. And we just did number 4. That leaves us with item number... I'm sorry, we just did number 5. That leaves us with item number 4. And
Item number 4 is the Board of Public Works report relative to the proposed contract with Martin Outdoor Media, LLC, for a citywide bus bench program.
Good afternoon. Lance Luis with the Beer Street Services. What you have before you today is our 10-year bus bench program, and that we started out with an RFP process on June 16th of 2010. On June 30th of 2010, we held a pre-proposal conference for all potential proposers, and the proposals were due on August 2nd, 2010. We received authorization from the Board of Public Works to negotiate a contract in January of 2011. And we completed those negotiations, and the board approved that negotiated contract on June 13th of this year. At that point, the contract was forwarded to council and mayor for its approval. And today we're recommending that the committee approve the report and approve the contract for forwarding on to council and mayor for full approval.
thank you. Why don't we go to public comment first, and then we'll come back for questions and comments from the committee. So on item number 4, we have a number of cards. Marcia Haber Kamine. Oh my. Is that a O, E? I need glasses.
I'm sorry?
You're after the K.
A-M-I-N-E.
Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Because I'm concerned about the clock, I wrote out my remarks. I'm going to hand them to you
Sure.
in case I run out of time. I want to thank you for your time today. Council members. And what I'm here today to offer is a request that you do not recommend this contract going forward to City Council to be approved and to the Mayor's office, and to recommend that it be returned to the Board of Public Works for rebid. There are several issues of significance, and the biggest issue, which is the most egregious, is that this contract award to an LLC which did not even bid the project, did not submit all the documentation that you require under the admin code. For instance, the contractor's responsibility section under 1040. It's being awarded to an entity that did not propose, did not attend the mandatory pre-bid meeting, and is receiving over the life of the contract a subsidy of $750,000, which is going to be a deduct from any revenues that would be paid to the city. The city is in the worst financial crisis in all the years that I have lived here. You have city attorneys who are now on furlough for 36 days a year, and to be giving up $483,000 for an expedited bench rollout that to a company that didn't bid the job, and other bidders were not given that opportunity, is patently unfair. It's ludicrous. It's completely without any rational justification. The city shouldn't be giving a financial subsidy to a contractor. The contractor should be paying the city. The worst part about all this is that during the negotiation process, negotiations changed the terms of the RFP. So, for instance, We have Martin Outdoor Advertising, Inc. that bids the job, and then they do a bait and switch, and we have an LLC now. Can I just finish my sentence?
Sure.
An LLC now that's proposing to do the job. You have no financials, no information about this company, no contractor responsibility form, nothing. So you're awarding to an unknown entity that if it goes belly up and doesn't have insurance, you're going to have an unfunded liability which violates the city charter, section 320. With that, I will hope that you will read my paperwork or glance through it at least before you vote. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you. And your card here says that you're representing Norman Bench?
Yes, they were the third bidder on the project.
Okay, so if we have any questions, we could call you back up.
Absolutely.
Okay.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much. Margot Bennett? Hello?
Good afternoon. My name is Margot Bennett, and I'm the Executive Director of Women Against Gun Violence. And I'm here to support a clause in the contract that prohibits alcohol-related posters on buses. And we support that because we recognize the link between alcohol and gun violence. And in fact, we're hoping that that clause will be able to be extended to include posters of gun violence in the future.
Great. Thank you very much. Dennis Hathaway?
Thank you very much. I'm Dennis Hathaway, president of the Coalition to Ban Billboard Blight. And I've heard from quite a lot of people who are very happy that the Board of Public Works put this prohibition in on alcohol advertising. I hope and trust that this committee will support that and the full City Council. I also hear from people who are concerned with other content issues with advertising on public property, in our public right-of-way, on our sidewalks, right in our streets. And one of those, the last speaker just mentioned, are depictions of guns and violence that are depicted in a very glamorous way. And often these are in places where youth congregate. They are near schools. They are near neighborhoods where there's lots of gang activity. And I think that there will be more contracts and more things of this nature will come before this committee in the future, because there are initiatives and concepts, as you well know, out there right now that are being discussed for raising revenue by selling advertising on public property. So as those come before you, I hope that you will consider those kind of restrictions and so that we don't have inappropriate advertising in our public right-of-way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Kathy Delgadone.
My name is Kathy Deladani, and I'm representing the Tarzana Improvement Association. And I attended the Public Works Board Committee meeting, and I spoke of my concern of the lack of communication with the bids, especially regarding this contract. The bids, many of the bids have benches in the public right-of-way at the bus stops, and the concern was that they don't want to have these removed or their permit revoked. A couple of the board members assured me that they would work with the bids, but I just want to reiterate that it's very important to work with the bids and not undermine the bids in their efforts to market and beautify their communities. Thank you.
Thank you. John Whitaker.
Good afternoon. My name is John Whitaker. I work at Tarzana Treatment Centers, and I'm also the AWARE liaison, which is always working toward advancing recovering environments. And I'm here supporting the provision as it is currently stated. We want to, however, I'm concerned as a citizen and a long-term Angelino that these that Angelino wasn't given this opportunity to work for our city, and another city got the bid, basically, to work in our city. But secondly, and most importantly, Norman Bench has always had in their working, always not having any alcohol or inappropriate matter on their benches. When we came to the Public Works Committee, my group and the LA Coalition to Ban Alcohol Ads, we were able to get it in the public record and to have that ban remain. And we want to make sure that that does continue as is currently constituted, and that Martin Outdoor had agreed even before it was mandated, but we want to make sure that it maintains that mandate, that there will be no alcohol ads. And along with me or following me will be some members from Tarzana Treatment Centers helping to explain why we feel the importance of keeping alcohol ads specifically out of the property that is ours. We are the citizens of Los Angeles. We together own those properties as a group of people, and we do not want to support alcohol ads, which the city is going to have to pay a lot more money in the long run for advertising through emergency services that will be called instead.
Thank you. Tina X. Delody? I. Delody. Is that a Y or an X?
Y.
Even if I knew it was a Y, I still pronounced it wrong, right? How do you pronounce it?
I'm a 32-year-old mother of 3. I have a 9-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 9-month-old. When my oldest daughter began learning how to read, she decided that she wanted to point out everything. What does that say? What does that say? You know, and whether it's the 405 sign or, you know, the Budweiser sign. I grew up blocks away from the Anheuser-Busch factory, so that's, you know, was something that we passed by. I'm just asking that these are removed. I am a member of AWARE, also in long-term recovery, and things like that were things that contributed to the way that my lifestyle began. And I see that it's now the error in my ways, that things could have been stopped at a certain point. And I just say that you know, rather than looking towards big corporations to give the extra money so that they can have a Budweiser sign, you know, or Corona, or, you know, whatever, you know, instead of looking towards the monetary gain, to look more towards the future and maybe promote Elena's Beauty Salon, you know, to where they may, you know, eventually it would be the benefits in our own communities, rather than, you know, outside the areas, and to promote these businesses there, where the future would be, you know, jobs for teenagers there and stuff like that, which would increase the pride in our own communities, rather than looking towards getting them drunk, you know, and looking towards those ways of, you know, possibly having a greater benefit in the long run. And you know, I realize that it takes a village to raise a child, and this is something that we need to look at, you know, a greater need, rather than just, you know, a couple dollars. Well, I realize whatever, but and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy Chajdaki?
Good afternoon. I'm a member of AWARE, and I want to support no alcohol ads on bus benches. Early in my childhood, I rode public transportation, and I could see how alcohol ads would be bad. My kids are about the age, and they're starting to ride public transportation. And I can honestly remember when I was a little kid, the first time I snuck a beer out of the fridge was during a Super Bowl because of alcohol advertising. And I don't feel it's right for kids to be going back and forth from school, and we have enough advertising as it is, let alone on the bus benches where kids are waiting for buses to go to school and come home from. Thank you.
Thank you. Jorge Castillo?
Thank you, council members. My name is Jorge Castillo from Alcohol Justice, formerly Marin Institute. We monitor the alcohol companies, and we support keeping the contract as it is with the exclusion of alcohol ads on bus benches because we think it's the right thing to do. We published a report 3 years ago that was scientifically approved by our peers and by the Director of Public Health in Los Angeles, where we allocated that the cost to Los Angeles from the harm of alcohol is $10.8 billion a year. And out of that, $2 billion is public costs when it comes to emergency care, judicial costs, illness, and other related incidents related to alcohol. So we feel that in a time when there's cutbacks in treatment, prevention, the city should invest in promoting alcohol, which in turn will cost money to its citizens and its residents. So we strongly support the exclusion of alcohol ads on bus benches, and we want to commend Martin Outdoor Media for stepping up and being a responsible company and offering not to advertise alcohol.
Thank you. Talia Maturo. And for the record, we've been joined by Councilmember Richard Alarcon. Hi, welcome.
Hi, I as well am with AWARE, and I'm long-term recovery at Trasana Treatment Center. And I don't have children, but I can say that there has been studies that, children in the 6th grade are starting to use alcohol and drugs, et cetera. And I can say that for me, that's when it started with me. It was when I was 11 years old in 6th grade. And I just want to put a little example out there because there is so much media and all the, public, especially on buses where children are taking, buses everywhere to and from school. It is sending messages to children. And you know what, the thing with me was that I looked up to older people. So, they see that their parents and all the media on the Super Bowl, all of that, et cetera, and all it's doing is sending more subliminal messages, which is going to create more problems, eventually more violence, more addiction, and it's just going to create more problems. So I just wanted to put that out there for you guys to see.
Thank you. Charles Porter.
Good afternoon. My name is Charles Porter, and I work with United Coalition East Prevention Project in the Skid Row area, a drug prevention program. And I come before you to comment on this ban on alcohol ads on public property. We believe this is a timely and a responsible move to ban alcohol ads on the public property. And one thing that we constantly echo is the issue of protecting the public health. We go to a lot of city council hearings and zoning hearings on the redevelopment taking place downtown. Everybody wants to sell alcohol. And when you have an over-concentration of outlets and messages everywhere to promoting alcohol consumption, we also have to take into consideration not only the profits the alcohol sales make, because that's what business owners often make and what the alcohol industry promotes, but also the impact on public health. And actually, the Marin Institute issued a report talking about the true cost of alcohol, on public health and the resources that are allocated to address issues around alcohol. Actually, also came today with two of our young coalition members, Jesus and Danny. They're a little shy, but maybe they can stand up and wave their hand over there. So it is a concern, citywide. And we stand in solidarity with those who spoke previously. This is a serious matter for many community members, and we ask that you continue to support such measures and bans on alcohol on public property. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Craig Wimberly.
My name is Craig Wimberly. I am also in Tarzana Treatment Center. I'm a father of 5. And I think as a father, I take my kids through enough. And I don't think that they should be exposed to alcohol ads. My 4-year-old is learning how to read now, and he's in school, and he's telling me, "Daddy, is that what you drink?" And it's kind of embarrassing to say yes. But I rather for the money be put towards something like some education, like something like sports and whatever. Because I'm an ex-basketball player, and I just don't want my kids to be exposed or go down the road I went down of drugs and alcohol. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ruben Rodriguez?
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Ruben Rodriguez, and I am Executive Director of Pueblo y Salud, a social and human service agency in the city of San Fernando. We've been working on prevention of alcohol and drug abuse and tobacco since 1991. I am also acting chair of the Coalition to Ban Alcohol Ads on Public Property in the city of Los Angeles. And I'm just here to encourage you to go ahead and uphold the recommendation as it stands, that the contract to Martin Outdoor Media be approved with the provision of no alcohol advertising to our community. You've already heard statistics, all the scientific research is available that says the harm caused by alcohol and other drugs. But I think I just want to remind you, it's way beyond the economics or the scientific research. It's just the social and human cost. Almost every incidence of domestic violence, crime is somehow related to somebody either abusing alcohol and other drugs. And I put that together because it's legal, we know, but it is a drug. And we hope that our children are not exposed to it, because I just want you to take into consideration that, advertising is to get us all to consume. But the new clientele, the market share, the new market share comes from children. It's not coming from us that are already here on this planet. So that all advertising, whether, it's sexy or funny or Ronald McDonald, it's encouraging the new client base, and it's all children. So with that, I encourage you to please uphold the recommendation as it stands. And I would just like to ask that for real future consideration, banning all future contracts from having liquor advertising. I would just like to submit some letters from us, and we have a package of over 100 organizations supporting our position. So please ban the liquor advertising. Thank you.
Thank you. Janet Turner.
Good afternoon. I'm Janet Turner, the chair of the Pacific Palisades Community Council, and I'm here to speak to you today about this bus bench contract. Pacific Palisades is very concerned that our specific plan and our scenic highway, Sunset Boulevard, could be compromised by this contract as it is written at the moment. Pacific Palisades has gone through a fundraising effort in the community to put beautiful benches, some pictures, and matching trash cans in order to beautify the city. It's our understanding that this current contract, the city bus benches could replace the community benches in order to meet the advertisers' needs, that the city bus benches could be placed next to the community benches, which, as you could see, would totally ruin the look and our beautifying efforts, and that the city bus benches could be put in a place in areas where we have permits to put them, but we just haven't finished the fundraising, so that they're, I guess you would call, are still open. But supposedly, according to this contract, you can rescind our permits, and you can actually take away one of our benches. So we'd like to request that you keep in mind that this contract should be such that all local zoning and specific plans be followed. We'd like to ask that you enable all council members to have a veto vote. I know that it allows for the councilmen to say where they might like to put it, but we didn't see anything about a veto vote. We thought that might be a really good idea. And we suggest that you have a mechanism where you can ask the neighborhood council and community councils for input, or have a way to appeal it. Thank you so much.
There's a question for you from Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, Ms. Turner, if I could, Thanks for submitting this. I just had a couple questions on this and looking at your exhibit. It appears that, well, two things. One is Pride, not familiar with, is that a bid?
Pride is a nonprofit organization that has raised the funds throughout the community to take out old benches and put these pretty ones in.
This money was just raised from community stakeholders?
Yes, the community
business?
fundraising effort.
And then I noticed on the picture that you have trash cans here.
Yes.
Who empties them?
Believe it or not, our Chamber of Commerce pays to empty them. They do not come under the city because they're not city trash cans anymore.
Right, that's right.
Yeah, but you see, we're just trying to beautify our area, and we just want to make sure it can be protected.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
That was, oh no, one more. Margarita Lopez.
Ms. Turner, is the Pacific Palisades Community Council a neighborhood council?
Well, we are a community council.
But are you an official city
We're not an
neighborhood
official
council?
neighborhood council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Margarita Lopez.
Yes. Good afternoon. I am from Pueblo y Salud, and I think Ruben already kind of talked about Pueblo y Salud, but I am their environmental prevention specialist. And I am here also for the same reason as you've been hearing. We definitely in the community do not need any more advertising trying to sell youth alcohol, because that's their target. I also am a seasoned student. I go to Cal State Northridge, and I see the impact of alcohol advertisement that does to college students. Every semester you hear somebody binge and they end up in the hospital, or they start over drinking, over partying, and end up not finishing the semester, dropping out. So definitely I feel that our community needs more positive messages, and rather seeing like alcohol advertisement. There is a big impact on the youth in our community, in the San Fernando Valley. We see it too, because most of the people there use public transportation. They don't afford to have their own car, so it will be there visible to them if we do have more like of Corona and Budweiser advertising the product. And we have already a big problem with DUIs. We don't need that anymore. I am also a computer literacy instructor for Pueblo y Salud, and we teach them also how to research the effects of alcohol, that many times the people who are consuming this have no idea that it's going to affect, their body in that way. So sometimes it's the lack of knowledge that people who use this happen to end up like sick and suffer alcoholism and domestic violence. So please take that to note. If you have kids, think of them. What are you going to say when they ask you, hey dad or hey mom, how come, what does that say, and what are you going to answer to that?
Thank you. Staff, come back up, please. I just have a couple of questions, and then we'll open it up to my colleagues. But on there was a number of people who came up and spoke today on the advertisement of alcohol. Now, in the contract, it is a straight prohibition of advertising for alcohol, or do we provide them some type of incentive not to advertise?
The contract language right now adopts the company's policy, which has a prohibition against alcohol.
So it's a straight prohibition. We are not incentivizing them by giving them a discount on, or anything else.
That's right.
Okay. The other comment was made by Pacific Palisades Community Council, and, for example, their concern was raised is that some of those nice benches that have been put up by the local community, and I assume they have some type of permit to do that. Would that be rescinded, and would their benches be replaced for a new bench?
Right now, we've been discussing this over, because we've heard these concerns raised within the last several weeks. We've had ongoing discussions with the contractor, and what we propose to do is actually with the committee's approval, draft up some amendment language that will be included before the contract gets forwarded to full council for approval. But that language will state that we will not be removing any existing benches, community-sponsored benches, with new bus benches at this point. If there's an existing bench out there that remains, we won't touch it. And the contractor will actually look elsewhere to place their bus benches at bus stops that do not have bus benches currently. And so that's one part of that.
So bottom line, this will not displace community benches.
That's correct.
That have been put up by a local group. Is that already in the contract, or?
It's not. That's why we'd have to write that little amendment up and include it in the contract.
But that's not in there yet.
Right now. No.
But it will be.
Right.
Before we approve it in council. Okay. And I understand that we will own the benches.
That's correct.
The benches will be ours. Does that create any liability for the city should we own the benches, or as had previously been done where we don't own the benches? You know, are we liable or not? I don't know. I mean, is there any difference in liability?
There is a liability issue in there, although both the contractor is required to indemnify the city in cases that have to deal specifically with, say, the bus bench design. There was a flaw in it.
Let's start out low, right?
Within the contract, there is an indemnification clause or a provision where the contractor does have to indemnify the city for any type of deficiencies with the product that they put out there, basically. So if the trash receptacle or the bench had some type of flaw built into it, and someone would be injured for it, then they would have to indemnify the city in that situation. The actual furniture itself, we see that as a neutral position as far as liability goes. Generally, if there is an accident on the street, whether we own the benches or whether a contractor owns the bench, because it's part of the city contract, the city usually is included in any type of liability claims related to an accident that may happen. So that, once again, we took that into consideration, but it ended up being overall for staff and for those that reviewed it a neutral position. So it was the fact that we own the benches actually helps us at the back end of the contract, where now we can control the transition. If we have another contract 10 years from now, where we can control the transition of our current contract or forthcoming contract with successive contracts.
Okay, so there's indemnification in the contract for the city on design for the bench. How about just where the bench is placed? Do we have any say where the bench is placed, and then will we be held liable because of the placement of the bench in a certain unsafe manner?
There are provisions in the contract that the city had to prove as far as a siting plan for the benches. In other words, it had to be so many inches behind the curb. It had to provide ADA access. It had to do a lot of these different things, stay clear of utilities and fire hydrants and poles. And so those type of things are written into the contract. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yes, I got that. And my last two questions is, do we have a provision in there that we are paying the contractor for an expedited installation of the benches?
That is one option that is written into the contract at this point. The contract actually has a total of 4 different scenarios where we could implement the bench program. 2 of those 4 scenarios involve no payment by the city. In other words, we'll receive the full benefit of the revenues projected in the contract. The other 2 are situations where either the city would have to pay the contractor for that, or we would take a reduction in our revenues over the years to have the contractor put out an expedited implementation of the benches. And a lot of that had to do with the uncertainty that I spoke about earlier about the previous contractor owning the benches, and so they control the removal of the benches at this point. And because we don't have that control over that, we include those expedited programs to minimize the disruption to the transit riders. So in other words, if the our previous contractor elected to take out the benches sooner, we could replace them sooner. Otherwise, the initial rollout period was over a course of 2 years.
Okay. And finally, this is the one you awarded a contract as a Florida-based company. Do we give any points in our RFP procedures to locally based firms or Los Angeles-based firms?
At the time that the RFP was issued, we did not. We understand that since the time that we started negotiating the contract, there was a council motion that put forth proposals to provide local companies with additional, I guess we want to call them rating points in the interview process. In this situation, this company still came out ahead. The local company, we had 3 proposers that responded to our RFP. The two highest companies were both not from the state of California, but their score so surpassed the third place proposer that even had we even given the third place proposer, say, another 15 points, it would not have affected the overall ranking of the three companies.
Questions, comments? Mr. Eloquent?
I actually have a number of recommendations. It's an interesting situation in a city this big that in some communities you want benches, in other communities you don't want benches, so it's a very difficult process as a council member to consider all the citywide implications of the decisions. First, let me say that in the northeast San Fernando Valley, people want more bus benches, especially when it's like 100 degrees and they're standing out there with their babies in uncovered, unsheltered bus benches. They want more bus benches. So the first recommendation I have is to increase the minimum number per council district to 300 instead of 225. That still would leave 1,500 benches that could be placed at the contractor's desire. Secondly, under the Norman contract or proposal, it said the city shall have the right to prioritize the installation of the minimum number of benches within each council district. I would like that provision in the Martin contract. So I would move that. This is a motion, by the way. All these considerations are a motion, and they are contingent on my support. I mean, I will not support this contract as is. Thirdly, the priority should be given to placing bus benches where the bus ridership is. I mean, it doesn't make any sense for us to place bus benches where we have the least ridership. It seems to me that somewhere along the line we got so focused on money we lost sight of the primary issue, which is providing bus benches to people, not making money. And so I think I would move that we give priority to bus benches being placed where the bus ridership is highest. I want to commend staff, first of all, just for doing this without quitting, because I know this is a very difficult contract to put together. But I also want to note that you've lowered the maximum number of benches from 8,700 to 6,000, which is kind of interesting, probably because we've reduced the number of buses, or I'm not sure what is that driven by?
Basically, we set 6,000 as a goal within the RFP language, and so proposers would have to guarantee to provide a minimum of 6,000 benches. All three proposers actually guaranteed to do that. This company also plans to desires to install additional benches beyond that. So 6,000 is not necessarily a maximum number of benches that we'll receive, but it's actually a minimum. And so there's a potential for us to receive additional benches beyond that.
Okay, now I'm concerned about the community benches that were raised by Ms. Turner. The concern I have is that I agree that if a bus bench is placed next to an enhanced community bench, it could destroy the whole intent, and I think it serves a detrimental effect on the community. So I would, but I also recognize that there may be locations that have a community bench where the bus bench company might want to target that location, and they might be able to work with the community on a deal. So I would recommend that where a bus bench is proposed for a location where a community bench already exists, that the community organization that provided the bench should have veto authority.
We can certainly consider that. I'd like to go back.
No, it's not a consideration. I'm making it a motion.
I understand.
That, as part of the contract, yeah. It's not a consideration. We're considering it. We want you to implement it. So what I'm voting for today are these amendments. On the alcohol issue, I've never had the opportunity. Johnny, I want to point out Johnny Whitaker, well known from TV, but I want to say thank you. The guy I referred to you is doing great. He's working full time, and he's off the stuff. So thank you. As a past board member of Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, I absolutely concur with eliminating alcohol signage from these bus benches, and want to thank the staff for working with the proposed contractor to make sure that happens. So I would make those as a motion. If there is no second, then I would insert those as a minority report, unless I got a second on those items.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we go through each one and get some feedback from staff, and then we'll take that up.
Okay.
As to whether it's going to be a second or a minority report. But for now, let's go, Mr. Englander.
Okay, thank you. First, I want to start with thanking AWARE and all the folks that came here today. I think you need to be recognized. I don't know if this is the first time that some of you have come to speak publicly before a body like this. It looks by shaking of heads in the audience, it appears that it is, and it could be intimidating. And you come all the way downtown and sit before some strangers, and you're speaking into a microphone, and who knows who's listening in on the other end to talk about some of your life stories and share some of your thoughts of issues in the community and what you've struggled with your families and your kids. And so I applaud you for doing that, and thank you for stepping up and coming forward. So appreciate that. I hear Mr. Alarcon saying, but I have no but on that. Just thank you. Now going into this contract, which I know isn't necessarily about alcohol, and I want to go back to that issue in a moment because I don't support that either. I don't believe it was even part of the RFP, so I'm not sure where that comes into play, but I'll figure that out in a moment. I just have some questions for staff to start off with. First of all, appears that this contract, we are forced right now to make a decision on it before we go into the recess on August 19th, is what it says here, or it's effectuated automatically. Is that correct?
I believe the city charter amendment requires action, the council and mayor to take action on a contract for approval within 60 days, or it's deemed approved. That's my understanding.
Okay, so it's deemed approved and if we take no action at all. And when did this RFP, how long ago did we first start an advertising program, bus bench program in the city of Los Angeles? When, just for historic purposes, when did we start this? I'm sorry, when did we first start an advertising program
I didn't understand.
in the city of LA?
I believe it was back in 1989, 1990.
1989, 1990. And so how long was that contract?
It was a 10-year contract.
A 10-year contract? And it was, if it was a 10-year contract, it would have expired a couple years ago. We just kept it going?
It expired, right, in January 2010.
So we knew 10 years ago that this contract was going to be expiring at some point in time. And when did the RFP go out to either for new bids or renewal? When did the new RFP go out on this?
Once again, in June of 2010.
In June of 2010.
That's right.
And so it's been well over a year that we put out the RFP. And when did we get the responses back?
We received the responses back in August and September of 2010.
In August of 2010. So it's been a year, exactly a year, that we got the responses back. And what you're telling this body here today is that we have to make a decision right now. And if we don't make a decision, we enter into a contract on an RFP that we received over a year ago. What took a year? Well, we'll get back to that. Sure. What's this contract worth financially to the company that receives it over the life of the contract?
I'd have to ask Martin Outdoor Media to come up and answer that question.
Okay. I'd like to know the answer to that before we conclude this committee meeting. I'd like to know the answer of the totality of the revenue and what this contract is actually worth that's being forced on this committee to take action today, or if we fail to take any action, then it reverts to an automatic acceptance of a contract that's worth potentially tens of millions of dollars. Okay, we'll come back to that then. And what's it worth to the city of Los Angeles financially in advertising?
Right now, the revenue structure over the 10-year period of the contract, if we do not elect to do the expedited rollout of the furniture, guarantees the city a minimum of $2.76 million.
Over the life of the contract?
Over the 10-year span of the contract.
So roughly, what did you say, $3 million or so?
Right, 2.7. Yeah,
2.7 million?
Yeah.
Okay.
If I could come in, there's two columns here. One says with alcohol ads, and the other says without alcohol ads. I thought we weren't doing alcohol ads, period.
Right. What happened was the original contract proposal actually contemplated having alcohol advertisement. In fact, the alcohol advertisement policy was changed while the contract was being vetted through the Board of Public Works. And so at that time, the company changed its policy to exclude alcohol altogether.
So that wasn't in the original bid?
It was not in part of the original contract, no. We did not exclude that.
This was negotiated after the fact?
That's correct.
Okay. And then, in looking back at this, what was just handed out was a revenue contract compensation comparison chart with prior contracts versus current contracts, proposed contracts, in different columns, as the chairman alluded to, with alcohol, without alcohol, and a differential. What it doesn't tell me is what the revenue is. It tells me that to the city. It doesn't tell me what this contract value is over 10 years to the contractor itself. That's not on this chart. But with this chart, though, it does say that with or without alcohol sales. So the differential, I'm assuming it's about a 1% based on a 10% compensation rate. Is that correct? That's what it says here. Plus 10% of gross revenue, plus 9% of gross revenue. So we're, in essence, giving them back a bonus for not having alcohol by lowering their compensation of gross revenue to the city by 1%. That's how I'm reading this.
How should I put this? We're not really giving them a bonus. What happened is that their revenue, their projections, including alcohol advertisements, when they initially submitted their proposal, was somewhat higher. And so when they had to go back and recalculate the financial impacts of not having alcohol advertisements, they essentially came back with a response that it would reduce their overall financial projections by approximately 10%. Mm-hmm. This 10% versus 9% of growth.
Yeah, but my question, though, is we didn't bid it out that way in the RFP, correct? So it's not apples to apples. In other words, if another, and I don't know what the other bids were, and I'm not trying to open up that can of worms. I'm just looking at this one. This is enough to try to figure out. And it sounds like the clock's ticking. We don't have a lot of choices. But with that, with a 1% bonus back, which is basically what it is, it's a contract enhancement. It was not given in the original RFP. It was negotiated after the fact. That's just what I wanted to know.
Correct.
Yes and no. So if I could just interject, Andrea Alarcon, I'm president of the Board of Public Works. So to take a quick step back in terms of the RFP process, the notion of restricting the types of advertisements on these bus benches was definitely contemplated in the RFP. Section 4.6.1 of the RFP very clearly stipulates that any negotiated contract would include, as the city is concerned with the display or placement of tobacco advertising and with limiting alcoholic advertising or any type of advertising which is false or misleading, and it goes on and on and on. So it was contemplated that the issue of alcoholic advertising would be part and parcel of the negotiations process.
Okay, yes, it was contemplated in the RFP, but it wasn't asked to bid that way. That's what I was after, and the answer was that's correct. It wasn't bid that way. Yeah. It was negotiated after the fact. Okay. So, thanks for that clarification.
If I may, that 10% is actually an additional revenue payment to the city on top of the minimum annual guaranteed fee. So in other words, if the company made in a given year an excess of money and that money of the gross revenue receipts, if 10% of the gross revenue receipts exceeded what the city was due in a particular year, we got the difference between 10% of the gross revenue receipts and the minimum annual fee that's in the schedule here. So it's additional fees to the city basically we're going to be able to generate. Now, because of the reduction of the advertisement, what the company came back with, because once again, that financial aspect.
I'm trying to understand this. So they bid one price, and we came back and said, well, yes, but if we want you to allow this certain types of advertising, you're going to receive less money. We realize that, so we're not going to charge you as much.
That's right. The tariff rate.
Why didn't we just, if that was the intent of the city in the first place, to never allow it, which if you heard all these fine folks that came here today, I think we should listen to the community. They never wanted it. I don't think a lot of council members want it in their district as policymakers as well. Why did we have it in the bid in the first place?
There was initially the alcohol advertisements in general. There's a lot of First Amendment issues, and that's why we ourselves cannot actually mandate that the company prohibit alcohol.
But then we can give them a reduction and a bonus in fees and incentives not to do it later? That's skirting the law. I mean, if we're recognizing that there's a law, I don't understand how we can go about doing it after the fact. It's the same difference.
You know, what the contract is designed to do is to enforce Martin's voluntarily agreed upon policy. So we're
paying for that.
Right, but we are accepting their policy. So we are not mandating certain prohibitions. We are accepting their voluntarily agreed to policy.
Right. So my question, though, is, and I guess it's a legal one, if we have a city attorney that can answer and I think we probably need to get a legal opinion. I'm not sure if legally we can do that. If we recognize, as was just eloquently stated, so I appreciate that we can't bid it out that way, how do we turn around on the flip side then and incentivize the very same thing we said we can't bid for? I mean, that's to me, it's not rational, but I know all laws aren't rational. So I think we need to get a legal opinion on that. I don't know if we can award a contract that has that. Do we have any other contracts in the city right now that allow that, and have those been challenged?
As far as alcohol advertisement?
To give them a reduction.
I'm not aware of that.
10% to 9%. Are there any existing contracts to date right now in the city of L.A. that give that reduction for non-advertising? The question is...
Not on this specific notion, but it's quite often the case that we will go through an RFP process and negotiate the terms with a specific contractor that is preferred without the specifics being incorporated into the original RFP.
That wasn't the question. No, I appreciate the clarification. The question is specifically relative to First Amendment alcohol, tobacco advertising. If we're not allowed to put it out in the RFP, how then can we go back later on and say, we're going to recognize that you voluntarily have this as a policy and therefore lower your gross receipts that you originally bid on to the city as revenue, and we're going to lower that and incentivize you because we thank you for recognizing that. I don't know how that's legal, so I think we need a legal opinion on that.
So during the entire process, there were at a minimum of 8 to 10 board hearings relative to this contract, which is to your point as to why it took a year to get to this point now. The city attorney was party to the negotiations of the contract, but they were also party to the development of the language of the RFP. Throughout the course of the entire process, the city attorney has supported all recommendations, and the board would not have adopted the contract nor authorized staff to negotiate the contract had there been a conflicting...
Right. I appreciate that statement. The question, though, is was that specific question asked? And was it answered by a city attorney, or was it just that they were supporting it in the totality? That was the question. And because I've seen certainly a lot of contracts after the fact come up where the city attorney has stated either in closed session or even publicly, no, we can't do that. I know we've done it at the time. They were sitting at the table at the time as well. So the question is relative to that, and I think we could probably get an answer on that. But more importantly, and that was just I think we need a clarification on that. We have, and I think it was stated earlier, an escalator in here as an option. There are various options for implementation. One is to pay an expedited fee for implementing the installation of these benches throughout the city. And I'm trying to figure out why we would pay a company an expedited fee when either we already have, that's revenue, that's money out of our pocket. Any dollars we spend right now is away from police and fire and cleaning up the community, taking care of nonprofit organizations, putting these fine folks back to work in our community. Those are dollars, those are real dollars, and I think that's important to recognize today in our fiscal crises. So having said that, why then, if we knew this was coming for 10 years, even though, and I applaud the Board of Public Works spending a year working out all the details of this. It's incredibly complicated, I get that, but we knew it was coming for 10 years. It's not something that just happened a year ago or 2 or 3 or 4 years ago. We started down this track 10 years ago, 11, 12 years ago, actually, it was stated on the record. So we knew this was coming. So the question is, why then the urgency to come up with some expedited installation cost of $500,000? And I think it states in here as well that in addition, if they couldn't do it on time, the city would then spend even more money, up to $65,000, to purchase temporary, which I'm not sure what that means, benches made out of concrete and wood, which doesn't sound environmentally sound, at our cost, and I'm not sure where that money's coming from, if it was part of the original fiscal budget, but it states here we would purchase temporary ones if we couldn't get the implementation fee expedited in time. And it sounds like we're trying to really rush this thing, and I'm trying to find out why.
So let me just, this is, Lance, you can answer the second portion of the question, but to your first question as to why did we include and incorporate an accelerated implementation schedule or term in this new contract, given that we've known for 10 years that this contract was going to expire and that we were going to have to roll out the implementation over a certain period of time. The former contract, or former existing contract, contemplated, very specifically articulated that it was the contractor's responsibility to remove the bus benches at the direction of the city. We have always believed in good faith that our current existing contractor would comply with that term and would comply with the city direction in terms of the removal of the bus benches citywide. And what we envisioned was removal of those bus benches over an extended period of time so that there was a less impact on the bus riding population, and there would be a smooth transition with the new contractor. However, during the course of the again, 8 to 10 board hearings and various conversations with the, again, current contractor, it was made very clear in public forum and in private meetings that they were considering removing the bus benches within 30-day period. And I asked very clearly in public forum, time and time again, are you saying that you will remove the bus benches within 30 days if the contract is awarded? And he said yes. So the concern was the board then continued the item because the accelerated implementation plan was not included in the contract. We continued the item because I said we have to have a safeguard. The city cannot afford having the entire citywide network of bus benches removed within 30 days. Whether it's feasible or not, it was still something that was stipulated for the record. So it was a concern for me. So I asked staff to go back to Martin and say, what can we do in the case that they in fact do start to remove bus benches citywide within a 30-day time frame? What can we do to reduce the impact on the bus riding population? Rather than it be a 2-year implementation plan, how aggressive can we get? In conversations between staff and Martin had subsequent conversations with their manufacturing contacts and so forth, they developed an accelerated implementation plan, which was then incorporated into the contract. And it's only at our option. It's only in the case that the city elects to exercise that option. If, in fact, the current contractor does comply with the city's direction in terms of the removal plan, this option will never be implemented.
Okay, we'll come back to that too then. I think it opened up another line of questioning that I'm not sure about with the terms of the installation of the new ones and the temporary ones. I think you were going to address the temporary, purchasing actually temporary.
Certainly. So the situation was that, once again, as Commissioner Alarcon explained, if the existing contractor had removed his benches in the 30-day period, there is a fabrication time that even if we were to say, once we executed the contract, the fabricators would take probably 6 to 8 weeks to just manufacture a bench. Just the first bench that started from day one wouldn't come off the production line for about 6 to 8 weeks. And so had the existing contractor remove the benches, in order to minimize, once again, the impact to our bus riding public, this company was going to be make available these temporary benches that would be placed out on the sidewalks wherever the existing bus bench contractor happened to take.
And these temporary, will they have advertising on them as well?
We did not discuss. I'd have to ask the Martin about that. Most likely they would, but once again, they would be temporary. Once the permanent benches were manufactured, they'd be replaced by the nice metal benches that we contemplated in the original contract. These concrete and wood benches would then be removed, and so that $67,000 was for up to 450 of these.
Do you have any renderings of these temporary benches that are going to be blighting our community? Now, what also happens, let me ask you, with advertising on them, so I'm not sure how well the advertising is secured, how long they could possibly be out there, if they're weatherized, and then the question if there was a delay for whatever reason. I don't know. The totality of this citywide is 6,000 benches?
This is another point of concern. There is no current inventory on hand because it was the responsibility of our existing contractor to maintain that inventory, and unfortunately they have not.
So there's no inventory on hand. Has there ever been in the history of the city, or forget the city, let's expand it a little bit, the history of the country, an installation in 30 days of 6,000 bus benches? If there's no inventory on hand, do we know how long it takes to manufacture according to our specs?
Again, why I said whether feasible or not, it was a viable threat. I don't know what resources they would be willing to call in to effectuate that threat, but it was a very clear articulation that within 30 days they were going to start to remove their bus benches, whether in fact it was the entire inventory, which we believe at this juncture is approximately 4,700, or not, or whether it was these certain pockets of non-profitable benches. That would be entirely speculative, and so we just...
and that's sort of my concern, and this is where I was going to this. If they, let's assume they recognize that and remove the close to 5,000 benches citywide within 30 days, but yet we couldn't manufacture that many or get them installed, and it could take months. We've paid an expedited fee, but then the contractor comes back and says, well, thank you for the $500,000 in expedited installation fees. However, it's beyond our control because the materials aren't even available, so we'll install them as they come in over the next 2 years or whatever the case may be. We don't know. It's never been done to manufacture that many install that quickly. So my question is, now we've paid a fee. Now we're in it to another $65,000 to $100,000 for temporary benches that we don't know the life of, and how we're going to be disposing of those when the contract is done. Is that if we put in 5,000 temporary bus benches? I mean, my concern is the riders along these routes as well that rely on them. As Mr. Alarcon said, we've got a lot of people, particularly in busy routes, that rely on these when it's hot out. They're looking for a place to sit when they're tired. This is their main means of transportation. We certainly don't want them sitting on the street. And to have temporary benches at best that may not hold up, weather permitting, that we don't know what's going on, where we've paid $500,000, it just doesn't sound like this is really, it's been well vetted, but not well thought out. It sounds like it was sort of rushed at the end to me. And so those are where my concerns are, and I don't know that we have all the answers to that.
May I respond to that?
Absolutely.
So the 3,000 benches that would be installed within 90 days are not temporary benches. Those are permanent benches. Those are our full-blown, the models that we sought after through the original RFP.
Will they then be replaced with the Martin benches when those come in?
Those are the Martin benches.
Because it says temporary benches.
The temporary benches are only 450 of those, and those are just to cover locations where we lose a bus bench during the manufacturing process. The longest those temporary benches will be out there is 90 days.
Do we have a guarantee from the manufacturer?
And if they don't fulfill that, then we go and file breach of contract.
That's okay. So what happens if it's great to have a material breach and be tied up in a lawsuit and getting millions of dollars, but when we have thousands of riders out there with no place to sit? So my concern is over them, quite frankly, and I think we've got a fiduciary responsibility to the ones who elected us to serve, and those are a lot of the riders along these routes. 450 benches doesn't cover benches that require 5,000 benches. So what do we do in that gap? That's a pretty big gap.
That's exactly why the provision was included in the contract and why we continued the matter, because we were concerned that there was going to be an extended period of time in between when the differential between when the bus benches, the actual permanent bus benches could be manufactured and when they would be installed.
Right.
As you noted, it is I don't even know if it's feasible to install 6,000 bus benches in a matter of 30 days. I highly doubt it. But all of those issues were definitely considered, and why the alternative was no temporary bus bench.
Mm-hmm. So with that, and then have we made offers perhaps to the existing, we don't own the current benches, is what you stated earlier, it's the previous contractor. Have we made offers to them to purchase them? Have we actually made a purchase offer since we already have them installed, they're already on the streets? I believe, were these the original benches that were put in 12 years ago?
10 years ago, yes.
10 years ago?
Yes, there was never an offer made to purchase the existing furniture, but there is a provision in the contract that would allow for our existing contractor, in the case that our existing contractor decides to abandon the bus benches or would just elect that it's not financially feasible for them to remove the bus benches, for our new contractor to remove them at no additional expense to the city or to the existing contractor. They would then deliver them back to the city, and we would transfer them back to our existing contractor. They, for the record, said that that was not acceptable to them.
It sounds like a lot of ors. Yeah. Okay. So we've looked at all those options, except have we looked at the option of a phase out? Did we approach it and say, look, we can't do this in 30 days or 60 days. Maybe there's an option to purchase. I don't know if that had come up. It sounds like everything was explored except a purchase, but perhaps a phase out where we said, look, we can phase this out in different parts of the city and work together. We can do the Northwest San Fernando Valley, and that can be over 60 days or 90 days, and we can work on installation and revenue sharing and phase that out over time. Was that ever proposed?
There was, in fact, as one of the scenarios that we put forth, a revenue sharing option during the transition period where the incumbent contractor would do a revenue sharing program with the existing contractor to ease that transitional process. And that offer was subsequently rejected through the discussions.
Rejected by
the existing bus bench contractor.
By the existing contractor. Okay. And we started talking about the size. It's 5,000 or 6,000, 5,000 citywide, and how long it would take. And one of my concerns as well was this is an out-of-state company, and it appears from trying to research some of the information about the company that we're awarding a contract to, it's changed names 2 or 3 times during this process from the time we went out to bid to we had the bidders conference, the pre-proposal conference. It's a different name now than it had been. And just by simple Google searches, if you pull that up, which I did a little bit of research because I wanted to know what I'm voting on to rush into a contract that if I don't vote on, we award anyway. So it's nice to know what you're voting on. And I couldn't find a lot of information other than it seems and appears that there are some public record searches that just come up on Google about the existing company that's bidding on this, or the original company. Apparently the name has changed 2 or 3 times since we started this process, and I'm not sure why. But not only are they a very small company, but it's a company that appears has had numerous problems with other municipalities. But then if I look at the bid, it says they've never had any problems. And so I want to try to figure that out and what the research found, and if we actually went back and checked with their references, because it's right on Google that it shows that they've had numerous problems under the original name, not the new awardee name, which is the same address that comes up, but the original name that bid on the contract.
Staff did go back and verify all references. We also had, in addition to references that were provided through the proposal from the Martin Outdoor Media, we also were made aware of other articles, newspaper articles, what have you, that had similar type of concerns raised about Martin Outdoor Media. And we verified those as well. We contacted the cities that were in question. In most cases, in every case that we checked out, and where those type of news articles were, that the city said, no, there's no problem with the company. We're happy with them. There was in fact, I think in one situation, Martin Outdoor Media actually had a lawsuit against the city because the city failed to fulfill its obligations. So it was something that kind of got turned around a little bit, and I think there are representatives from Martin here that could probably attest to that a little bit better than I can. But that's our understanding, and that's how we did vet those particular issues out through the RFP process.
Oh, okay. I'm not going to debate it. I mean, it says in the articles that I found, it was the city managers and mayors were quoted directly saying that they were trying to fire the company, is what I saw on the record. So I don't know how that could be disputed. But in any event, I've seen press get it wrong before.
Yeah, so that item came before. There were several items of protest submitted by Marcia Kamine, who represents Norman. One of the issues was, in fact, the disclosure of any legal actions.
Where's Marcus Allen? He pulled the alarm. Testing. Okay. The words. You know, if we actually had advertising on the message, we could create some revenue off of that. That we're testing the system. If you're thirsty, go get a Coca-Cola. You could be. Okay. So, now that we've gotten the test.
So I was, as I was saying, one of the requirements of the RFP was disclosure of any litigation, ongoing litigation, where the proposer was named as the defendant. The protest, the content of the protest was that by virtue of their non-disclosure of litigation pending in the court, that they should be deemed non-responsive. However, based on the city attorneys as well as Martin Outdoors, legal counsel's research and presentation submissions to the board and to the city attorney for review, in fact, Martin was the plaintiff in that matter, was not the defendant, therefore was not subject to disclosure.
That was one matter. I was talking about three others. But yes, thank you for that clarification. Question on the on Martin as well, as we were talking about trying to figure out who the company is behind the company. Why did and I'm sorry, somebody else sat at the table.
Yes, my name is Glenn Flutie. I'm a vice president of Martin Outdoor.
Okay. I didn't have any questions for you yet, but.
Yes, sir.
My question on the.
Excuse me, sir. We are aware that you are here, but let us now speak to the departments unless a council member calls you up.
Certainly.
For any questions. Thank you.
Thanks. On the, I'm trying to also figure out, as we're losing businesses out of the city of LA constantly, and for whatever reason, I realize that the council voted to support local preferential bonuses on RFPs, and that wasn't recognized yet on this, but you made the distinction that even if it were, there was a 15-point at least differential, and I think that's only 8 points for that maximum anyway. And I believe that ordinance is still pending in the city attorney's office, despite the fact that the council voted on that months ago. So that's another issue. Having said that, I couldn't find any history of Martin. Do they currently have a business license at all in the city of LA under any name? I mean, we're about to award a contract to a company that I realize they're not based in LA currently, and we require that if you do business with LA, you have to have a current business license to enter into a contract. Do they have a current business license? Because there's no record of it currently in the city.
I'd have to call Glenn up to respond to that question.
Okay. Well, when we call him up, we can ask that question. Just not.
My understanding is that since we started negotiations with them, they initiated that process to go ahead and get their business operation license here in the state of California, be incorporated. And I believe that we actually have documentation in the file, but I don't have that with me right now. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and during the board consideration of the matter, obviously local hiring, local employment is an important factor to be considered at every step of any process in terms of contract award. So it was a personal concern for me. So I asked on the record if they would be willing to agree to reestablish their headquarters or at least a significant business presence within the city of Los Angeles, not in the county, within the city parameters. They said absolutely yes. Would they agree to certain provisions in terms of local hiring? They said yes. And the numbers, still to be determined in terms of the levels of subcontracting and so forth. And they can speak to their willingness at this point and their commitment to local hire. But it wasn't an issue that we very thoroughly discussed at board.
Okay. Yeah, my question, though, was do they currently have a business license today in the city of L.A.? And I think
that they, at least in my conversations with them, historically, the intent was to establish their business in the city of Los Angeles. However, the uncertainty as to whether or not this contract was going to in fact be awarded to them, they were waiting for at least some certainty before making such a stark transition.
Such a commitment to the city. Okay. The question on advertising on trash cans, I wanted to get into that if I could. I didn't see advertising on trash cans in the original RFP, and also wanted to address some of the concerns. We can come back to that Pacific Palisades Community Council brought up in the community benches, community trash cans. We've got several of those with bids throughout our district as well, throughout the city, where business improvement districts actually put them in. We also have some with neighborhood councils in the city. There's a plethora of them. And it was stated, I think, on the record earlier that the contractor will look elsewhere if they don't have that location because they want to meet that number. In fact, there was a motion made earlier to increase the citywide number of benches currently that were contracted. And we haven't yet even recognized how many benches are out there. So my question is, when did advertising play into this? Was it part of the original bid, that advertising on trash cans?
No, it was not. And in fact, the contract right now does not, for the 6,000 benches and the 3,000 receptacles associated with those benches, none of those receptacles have advertising on them. The advertising is strictly on the bench itself. Now, that being said, one of the things we did during the negotiation process is we did come forward and ask the company to provide us with an option that we could pursue with a community group that may have a decorative bench out there that has a distinct aesthetic, that has no, the designs that Martin Outdoor Media was offering us would not match up with. And so we did come up with an option, and once again, it's only if there's an existing streetscape aesthetic that we're trying to meet, specific plan, code, anything like that required a certain type of bench, to have a purely decorative bench with no advertising on it whatsoever, and adjacent to it would be a planter, or that can enclose a trash receptacle or a recycling bin, or once again, even landscaping, a planter itself, that had a panel on it. But that is only an option. It's not anything that's discussed within the standard provision of the contract. It was something that we would be able to offer up to the community.
How many current community benches and community trash cans are throughout the city of LA right now on bus routes?
I'm sorry, I don't have that information.
Does anybody have that information?
I'm not sure if anybody's been keeping that track of that information.
And here's where I have some grave concern over this, is we're looking at a major paradigm shift in the way that we've actually installed street furniture, in putting advertising out there with trash cans. When communities have gotten together with new vision plans, neighborhood councils and stakeholders have actually gotten together to implement their own streetscapes and furniture with trash cans that they're actually maintaining and paying for themselves. We've got business improvement districts that tax themselves to install, maintain, and clean the streets and empty those facilities as well. And we have no current inventory yet. We're negotiating a need. We don't even really know quite what's out there in terms of those inventories. I'm sorry, I'm being handed something else for whatever reason. Okay. In any event, we don't know how many there are or how this contract would be impacted by what those are. If we are guaranteeing amount, and that's the question, if we're going to guarantee an amount and say to a contractor, this is all based on this value, based on how many benches you're going to have at these locations, yet we don't even know what locations they can't go into, that's a grave concern, particularly since it was stated earlier that if there's a competing location for community bench, then the contractor, it would be up to them to find an alternative location. But what if the community is against that location? So the question of this is, has this contract, it sounds like there's been a lot of public works board meetings and discussions on this, and I applaud your efforts on that. You've certainly done your homework and really put a lot of time and effort into this, and I think for the right reasons, and I truly appreciate it. Has any work been done to go to the neighborhood councils and stakeholders for their input? This is a citywide major shift in what our streets are going to look like and different changes in styles on benches. This is the first time that I've seen contracts, I've seen drafts, I've seen RFPs. This is the first time I think I'm being handed an actual copy of the new design of a bench and a trash can that I've seen. And I've just been handed, it was just handed to me in committee. And I don't know that the public has seen this or not. Maybe they have. And there's different styles, planter styles. There are streetscape styles. There are Charleston bench and Savannah premium collections. So it sounds like there's a lot of different labels out there, and where we can go with this. Has this been brought to the city councils for their input and what they want their communities to look like, or even the bids that are paying, or communities like Pride, Pacific Palisades Community Council, have they weighed in on this directly as well?
Generally, that type of community interaction happens after the contract has been awarded. Usually while we're going through the negotiation process, those type of things are not brought out to the community specifically because the contract is being negotiated. And so until we have some finality to the contract, it really is not worthy endeavor to go out and discuss something that may never come about, and have some type of an agreement with the community that may think they're going to get something, and eventually, once we negotiate the contract, it's not part of that contract.
I wasn't, in thinking in terms of part of the contract, I recall, and it was a little bit before my time, but certainly I was able to read the newspapers, and I recall some time back when the city of Los Angeles went out to bid on public toilets on the streets. And one of the bidders came back with an advertising component, and it wasn't part of the RFP. And so nobody else bid it that way. And it was challenged. In fact, it was challenged before, I believe, in these public meetings. It was challenged, and there was the same thing, that they wouldn't put alcohol and tobacco, and they got reductions in revenue for that and enhancements, and it sounded, they put a pretty bow on it to say, well, we're not going to advertise alcohol and tobacco and city streets, but the original bid wasn't even part of advertising. So the question is whether we even want advertising on trash cans or not. And not looking at it as a means of just a revenue stream. But this public toilet RFP went out to bid on building and maintaining maintenance and operations of these facilities. And the bidder that came back, I can't recall who it was, they proposed advertising, and it was thrown out in court. I believe the RFP, if I recall, was thrown out. It was challenged in court. It cost the city millions of dollars to defend it. Years later, thrown out in court, and then they had to go out to RFP again. The new RFP came out and said, well, the city now wants advertising revenue, and they got a lot more bidders, and it was much more competitive, and it was an open process to say that that was, in fact, the spirit of what the policymakers wanted at the time, rather than staff trying to create new revenue streams. So the question is, was this ever discussed prior to the RFP going out with either the city council or the stakeholders in the community, the neighborhood council, to add additional advertising on trash cans?
No, it was not. If I could refer to the photos, that's one of the reasons why we decided to hand it out to you. But if you look at the first two photos, the photo on the second page, which is a sketch, this is in fact our standard bus bench that we negotiated in the contract. And you look at the trash receptacle that's associated with that, there is no advertising on the trash receptacle. Now, what we did during the negotiation process, and let me take a step back by saying I'm the city's senior landscape architect, and so I've been doing streetscape projects on behalf of the city for the past 15 to 20 years. Okay, so we've been working with community groups to, make their streets look much better. We've had these issues brought to us before regarding benches. We know that the communities want options, and as opposed to the previous contract, which just had one bench, one of the things that we did with this new proposals, we asked the proposers to provide us with alternative bench designs so that we could potentially integrate our program, in a harmonious manner with any type of streetscape that we might have out in the streets. And so what you see on the third page is actually a couple what we call designer bus benches. These are alternative designs that actually match up with quite a number of the community-sponsored benches out there. We can match the color. We can match, once again, the actual design of it is aesthetically almost identical to many of the benches.
Is there an implementation plan for working with the communities? I'd like to see that on how the design elements, either if we existing communities that have design review boards, or what that implementation plan is to roll it out to those various communities to say, here's the different design elements we have. Here's what's on there. I mean, this is the first time that I've seen it. And I'm being asked to vote on a multi-million-dollar 10-year contract. It's the first time I've seen this, and this is probably one of the most critical parts and elements of this is the design that we're going to be stuck with for many, many, many years. I just got to. Well, everything is details, Councilman, details. So this is the first time I've seen it. So my concern is that the communities has actually being able to weigh in. Is there that implementation? We have an implementation plan to pay the company a lot of money to hurry up and do it. But sometimes if we hurry up and do it wrong, and we're stuck with these for years, and we can't undo it, and we've already paid $500,000 at a minimum.
Mr. Chair, how long
That's my concern.
How long is this committee going to last? I have to pick up my daughter at
Quite a lot.
daycare.
This is a big contract. I wanted to do my due diligence.
I'm just trying to get a sense of timing because I have to pick up. And I have some questions as well. Okay, thank you.
I'll take a break.
Take a break.
All right.
And go to Mr.
I have a lot more questions. Okay.
There are two competitors in this contract.
A total of three that proposed.
A total of three. What happened to the other one? I'm familiar with Norman and with Martin. What happened to the third?
Norman and Martin, and the third company is called Creative Outdoor Media.
What happened to them?
They were the second place finisher, and as far as the rankings went in the RFP process, they're still in existence.
Okay.
We've not entered any type of further discussions with them. We initially when we started this negotiation process with Martin, we asked the board for authorization to potentially go to Creative since they're number 2 proposer in case our discussions with Martin did not, result in anything. But luckily for us, it has resulted in the contract.
Okay, now this is a request for proposal process?
Yes, it is.
And in a request for proposal process, you get a proposal and then you negotiate the specifics. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
So all of these bells and whistles that have been negotiated after the fact are because it was an RFP as opposed to a bid.
That's correct.
Okay, which requires the lowest bidder. So I think it's fairly standard practice. Now, secondly, I'm concerned about the Norman contract because when I was a city council member and an elected official for the last 18 years, I thought they did a horrible job. Does the staff have an assessment for how Norman did in performance on their contract? And didn't they put a bunch of bus benches all over my district illegally on properties that were not permitted?
I can't attest to that right now. I don't have that information before me.
Okay, well, that's my recollection that they were putting bus benches up all over the place, even where buses didn't go. And did this Norman, did they tell us where I hear that we had the difficulty understanding where they even put the bus benches because they wouldn't tell us. Have they told us where they put their bus benches?
Not to date, no.
So even to date, after 10 years.
Let me just clarify, because I can hear them. I hear the uproar. So when the contract was nearing expiration, and when I first became appointed, I created a contractual oversight committee, got very intimately briefed on the terms of the contract, came to find out that they were required to provide a variety of documents and forms of information, which included an inventory of the existing bus bench.
But they hadn't to date at that point.
They hadn't at that point. So as a result of that, and there were other financial records were never submitted and so forth, I sent a letter from the board approved by the city attorney to Norman, asking that they produce their financial records per the contract, an inventory per the contract, and so forth. A year later, they submitted a hard copy of a portion of an inventory. They said that it was going to be too labor intensive for them to figure out where the bus benches were in place, and so it took them quite some time to hand deliver.
Okay, so at what point did we figure out where their bus benches were?
A year after the contract had expired.
So that's a year after the contract expired? So they never told us where their bus benches were?
No.
How did we know that they were adhering to the contract? If we didn't know where their bus benches were and we had specific provisions for how many bus benches they're supposed to put out there, how do we know they performed?
Ron Olive, Assistant Director of Street Services. That's a fair question. I don't know how we answer that except for we didn't have the tight oversight, the control, and we didn't persistently pursue that question.
So how do we know that we were recompensed properly?
I'm sorry.
How do we know we were compensated properly?
Well, we did receive the minimum payments.
I think the answer to your question is we don't. Part of the letter requesting production of documents included financial records specifically to that point. The prior Norman contract required a minimum quarterly payment, a total annual payment of a little under $300,000 per year. Above and beyond that, there was a very complicated formula included in the contract that required additional percentage of gross revenues to be transferred to the city. However, it was incumbent upon the contractor to submit their financial records on an annual basis, to submit a cost calculation per the formula to the city. They never did that. Yes, could we have done greater oversight? Absolutely. I think that's a fair statement at this juncture. But per the contract, it was incumbent upon them to produce the information, to submit, to do the cost calculation, and to submit it.
So at some point, good faith has to enter into this. When we're negotiating contracts with businesses, we have to have the good faith that they're going to perform and that they're going to tell us that and show us how they are performing. In this case, you're saying that they paid us the minimum compensation required by the contract, but with no documentation to demonstrate their performance.
And to date, we still do not have the financial records in hand.
Why the heck would we want a contract with a company like that again? I don't understand this. This is insane. This is insane.
Before we go back to Mr. Englander, one of the questions I did want to clarify is we got information as to how much revenue the city will receive under the proposed contract, but we don't know how much revenue the company will receive. Is that accurate?
I think the company can speak to their revenue generation projections.
Yes, sir. You want to step up to the...
Yes,
what
sir.
I'm trying to get at, sir, is that, well, first of all, in the RFP, it's not a low bid, so how did you calculate, did you take into consideration how much profit or the company will make and how much they're giving us back in revenue?
Yes.
If it's a good deal for the city or not, et cetera?
Yes. So per the charter, I, as a commissioner, am precluded from participating in the review and assessment of the proposal during the neutral assessment process. So Lance can speak to the various factors, but they did include financial sustainability, capacity, and so forth.
So part of that discussion, I assume that every company gave you how much they project to receive total revenues and how much they're going to give the city of those total revenues. And that was part of your decision-making as to which you would award the contract to, correct?
That's correct. Well, just revenues to the city, not to the company itself.
Okay, just revenues to the city. And so I assume that those who would give us more, you'd give more points to, correct?
That's correct.
Now, in giving back this money from the alcohol that you're giving, I call it a discount. Would that change your view of how much money we're getting from each of? What if all the three companies, or whoever, how many bid?
Three companies.
What if all the three companies that bid, if they would have this alcohol discount, would that change anything?
I'm not sure if I understand your question.
Well, in other words, when you're going through the process, part of your calculation as to who to award this contract to was this one company is going to give us more to the city than these others. I assume that. Now, this company proposed to give us more than the other two?
Yes, it did.
They did, okay. But now, after the contract was awarded, you negotiated this discount on alcohol, without alcohol ads. Would that change how much money we would receive generally from the other company? Would it be less than the other companies would have given us?
It's hard for us to answer that without actually discussing it with those other two companies.
Because we don't know how many signs they have out there.
Right, we don't know how the alcohol advertising worked into their financial structure for the other two companies. Even for our current company, Martin, until this question was raised, we weren't aware of what percentage the alcohol advertising would be a part of their program. And so until that question was raised, and as they determined it's approximately 10% of their overall marketing strategy at that time when they initially proposed to the city.
But I think if we were to apply the 10% reduction in revenues per alcohol advertising that Martin is assuming, if we apply that across the board to the other two proposers, given that Martin was the largest revenue to the city, the same.
Have the same curve. It's a percentage. And my concern by doing this is just I don't want to put a value paying somebody not to advertise alcohol. We should just have a flat prohibition, period. Don't advertise alcohol, and we're not going to reward you for not advertising for alcohol. Could we have done that?
And actually, the contract doesn't necessarily say there is a reduction in the revenues that will be generated by the city. The contract simply articulates and outlines the minimum annual payment per year on a 10-year and then the 5-year option basis. There is no specific reduction in the contract. The way that I was able to compile the information before you is because when the contract was first presented to the board, there was no alcohol prohibition considered, and so the cost. The compensation terms were different, and then when we eventually got to the point where the prohibition on alcohol advertisements became a very serious consideration, we had a cost comparison. So without the alcohol advertisements, the contract was negotiated as such. With the alcohol advertisements, the contract was originally negotiated. Without the alcohol advertisements, Martin presented their compensation schedule. So that's just a comparison of the two. However, there is no articulation in the contract that says there is a specific reduction for alcohol, the prohibition on alcohol advertising.
Okay. And Mr. Alarcon proposed 4 points on he would like to amend this. I just want to go through them real quick, just get the department's feedback and the commission's feedback. Increase 300 from 225 per district. Is that feasible?
Yes.
It's feasible. What was the second one?
I think I've got some notes. So I think one of the other additions would be to include as a factor of consideration for the location of the bus benches, bus ridership.
Prioritized by bus rider.
That was number 3, wasn't it?
Yes.
And then there was another.
To have the right to prioritize the installation of the minimum number of benches within CD.
Okay.
The city shall also have the right.
I assume that's feasible if the first one's feasible, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then place bench. Go ahead, Mr. Alarcon.
The fourth one was that where there.
Wait, number 3. Is it a problem to place benches where the high priority where bus ridership is highest?
No, not that we are aware of.
So yes, it's feasible.
Yes,
it's
it is feasible to do that.
And what was it, number 4, Mr. Alarcon?
The fourth was to I thought I did 5, but I'm losing one. The one about the Palisades, where there is an existing community bench, that the organization that provided that community bench should have the ability to veto a proposed bench next to the existing community bench. The idea there is that they could probably work something out, and it would just be in conformance.
Is that feasible?
Yes. Well, we had already pre-stated that We won't be removing any existing bus benches for the new bus
Not
benches.
removing,
Right,
replacing
right,
next
or,
to.
I see.
So I
Yes,
could
we can
envision
talk.
placing the bus bench next to community benches with advertising on them perhaps, but that the company would negotiate with the community as to how the community might benefit.
We're seeing that it is feasible, yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Englander?
Yeah, just a couple things, and following up, and I think Mr. Alarcon made some extremely valid points, and for whatever reason, the old provider was brought up, that there was some bad history there. I'm not in favor of any of these guys, quite frankly. I just assume throw the whole thing out, and I don't think we got enough bidders on it. It's not so much the ones who bid or who won. We're picking the best of the worst, it sounds like. I'm not sure why, for somebody who's not capable. And so, in looking at, again, I go back to their statements earlier, and Mr. Alarcon had stated we don't even know where they put or installed these current benches. I haven't seen a plan for our district at all of where the new ones are being proposed to be installed. I'm not sure if we have that. And I know I mentioned earlier, it was stated that we enter these contracts in good faith. And we actually asked them, I think, as part of it, to fill out a past failure to complete or any type of history, if they've had history with municipalities, and it was stated on and I think it's a certified document that states as part of the bid requirement, as part of all of our bid requirements, that they haven't had any failed history with any of their current providers. But yet, and it was stated that there was one. But there's 4 different counties here that state they had let them go or terminated their contracts, and that was done so without a lawsuit, according to just Google searches. Having said that, it sounds like the advertising on the trash cans is sort of the sticking point. I understand that we renegotiate contracts after an RFP all the time. And there are enhancements and changes and implementation clauses, and all of those things have to be ironed out. It sounds to me that there was a tremendous amount of time put into that, and I recognize that time in a lot of work. But it also sounds like it changed it and to make it significantly different. And so I think we need a legal opinion, and I'd like to have a legal opinion when this comes to council, if there's a significant difference in how this relates to the same significant difference challenge that was upheld when the public toilets went in and added advertising, as this is what we're doing today. And it looks like we could get some other, if other folks knew that we would be adding additional advertising, and again, it was the same argument that was made on those. I wasn't here yet, so I couldn't tell you.
And you don't know who the chair of public works was?
10, 12 years ago? I'm not sure who the chair of public
So if I could just interject for a second. To be clear, the contract as written now only grants the exclusive right to advertising on bus benches. There is no provision in the contract that grants the exclusive right to advertising on trash receptacles. It's included as an option, and if that is the point of contention, we can remove that option very clearly.
Well, I think there were a lot of points, though, and it was awarded based on that.
Right.
It's an option?
It's an option. It's an option. It's an option that was discussed, that was actually requested by staff to provide communities with different variations to still allow bus benches to be installed and be harmonious with their existing streetscapes.
Okay, but we won't get any additional revenue from that, right?
No.
Well, why would we do that?
It'd be, because you'd still get the bench. There'd be a bench there that the company would be.
We're in discussions in the city about where we can, many of us don't want to advertise, but we're being pushed in a corner where we had to advertise on public property for additional revenue. We have that resource. We shouldn't give it away in this contract.
And that's what I can't figure out, is why we're creating that option. We hadn't include in the original RFP. It sounds like it may be a good idea, and it should be vetted with the community and the stakeholders who would want that additional advertising in exchange for having a receptacle. And I think that needs to be discussed, but not to be wrapped into a contract, and look at this holistically.
Make a motion. I second.
And so that's my motion, is to take the whole thing.
No.
And I'm glad Mr. Alarcon seconds that. And look at it holistically, to take the bus benches with the idea of advertising on trash cans that are attached to them. Some of these and the renderings that came out, we say it's an option. It's built into the bench. If you look at the planter-style bench, it's manufactured directly on the bench. So I don't know what kind of option that would be if that's the rendering that was just submitted. It doesn't look like an option. It looks like it's part of the bench.
It's not the final product.
So we don't even have a final product. So
For the
I think it's being rushed.
Within
and that's
30
my
days
point.
after the contract is awarded, the formal designs will be submitted.
I think there were a lot of good things that came out of this, and I think we could learn from that and move and go into a direction that solicits some other input from other bidders to expand that to include these other ideas that came into the negotiation after the fact. But I think we need that city attorney opinion as well to see if it's significantly different.
Mr. Chair, I would like to state for the record, as the former chair of the Public Works Committee, particularly during the time that the public toilets were being considered, the reason that ended wasn't because of a dispute in court. It was because the community didn't want them. They didn't want the toilets. They didn't want the signs. They didn't want them in their neighborhood. And for years, we struggled to figure out a way to make it happen, particularly in the downtown area. But we were never able to come up with a solution that the community wanted. It wasn't a court issue. There might have been some court involvement, but that wasn't the reason why we didn't get a toilet contract. We didn't get a toilet contract because the community didn't want a toilet in their public thoroughfares.
Okay, so let's do this. I'll go ahead and second Mr. Alarcon's 4. I scribbled down 4 of your points. I'm going to, and I assume somewhere in the record we have them, I'm going to add that we do not allow advertisement on trash cans, if you second that. And you want to make the motion to move this to council? Would you like to make the motion with those amendments to forward this to council, Mr.? Yes. Okay, I'll second that.
I'm just adding a minority report that we get the city attorney opinion back on that as well, if it's significantly different. But also to look at, I'd like to add to that, rather than the implementation part of it, some kind of phase out with whoever the existing owners of the current benches are, whether we can either buy them or Martin can buy them or whoever it is we entered a contract. If we end up doing that, I'd like a plan to come back where we can actually either buy them, or I want to make sure that people have a place to sit when they're waiting for, well, whoever it is, and you know.
The current contract is suggesting that they're going to pull them all out. You asked Congress that to negotiate.
Well, that's what I'd like to see that come back to council at the same time, at least some kind of phase-in plan rather than an overnight implementation plan that's costing us $500,000.
Okay, we'll have that minority report. It's requested by the chair for the minority report. And I believe that concludes this meeting. Thank you all very, very much. I do have a public speaker card, Marcia Camin, but Marcia, I want to let you know that public comment is for items not on the agenda, so if you'd like to speak, you can speak on anything that's not on the agenda today. Would you want to withdraw it? Is that? Okay, thank you. I'd have a fun day than not fun day. Let's get bored.